Hey everyone, in this video we're going to cover section 8.2 and talk about simple interest. Okay, so a few pieces of vocabulary. Interest is the dollar amount that we get paid for lending money or that we have to pay if we borrow money. The amount of money that we deposit or the amount of money that we borrow is called the principal amount. Okay, the amount of interest depending on the principal or the interest rate, which is given by a percent and varies from bank to bank, and the length of time in which the money is deposited. So we need to have a few pieces of information. We may need to know the principal amount, the amount that we put in the bank or borrow, the interest rate that the bank is charging or you're earning, and that'll help us figure out how much money we owe or how much money we're getting. Okay. When we have an account that is simple interest involves interest calculated only on the principal amount, only on the amount that you put in the bank. You get interest on, you charge interest on, or you earn interest on. Okay. One of the first formulas we're going to talk about is how to calculate just the interest amount. Okay. The formula looks like this: I equals PRT, where the P represents the principal amount, the R represents the interest rate that you're getting, and the T is in time, and that T is time in years. So if we say 2 and we put a 2 in there, that means we have the money in the account for 2 years. Okay, so make sure you remember that. So using that idea, looking at example number 1, it says that you deposit $2,000 in a savings account at Hometown Bank, which has a rate of 6%. Find the interest at the end of the first year. So because it's asking us just to find the interest, we can use that formula, I equals PRT, and we can fill in all the information to help us find the interest amount that we're going to earn. Remember, the P is the principal amount, so what was the starting amount that we put in the bank? $2,000. R is the interest rate, so 6%. But remember from the previous lessons, instead of using the number as a percent, we're going to convert that into a decimal version. So what is 6% written as a decimal? 0.06, good. And then T is the time in years. So how long are we going to put this $2,000 in the account for? Well, it says in the example for the first year. So we're going to say 1 for 1 year. We're going to then multiply 2,000 times 0.06 times 1, and that should give us the amount of interest that we earn in that 1 year. So if you calculate it, you should end up getting $120. So in 1 year, you earn $120 as long as you put your $2,000 in that account and you don't touch it for that whole year. So I may ask you an additional question, or I may ask you, how much money then do you have in your account total at the end of that year? You shouldn't have only $2,000. You should now have $2,000 plus this $120. So at the end of the first year, you should really end up having $2,120. So depending on what the question asks, you may need to go a little bit farther, where this question just asks you for the interest amount, but another question might ask you for the ending amount or your future value. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Look at example number 2 with me. It says a student took out a simple interest loan for $1,800 for 2 years at a rate of 8% to purchase a used car. Find the interest on the loan. So again, this question is just asking me for an interest. I know that it's simple interest, so we should be able to, again, use this equation. That interest is really the principal times the interest rate times the time in years. I don't know what the interest amount is. That's what we're trying to figure out. I do know that the principal amount, the amount that she originally borrowed, was $1,800. I know the interest rate was 8%, or as a decimal, 0.08. And I know that she's going to borrow this amount of money for 2 years. So I'm going to do 2 for my T. I'm going to calculate all of that by multiplying all of those numbers together. And you should end up getting $288. What that means is that in the end of the 2 years, she will owe an additional $288 to this bank. So she not only owes the $1,800 that she borrowed originally, but she owes an additional $288 on top of that. But the interest amount is just the $288. She had to pay an extra $288 for this used car because she had to borrow that money. Okay? All right, so this kind of leads us into the idea of future value. So in the first couple problems, we were just asked about the interest amount, but we might also be asked about our future value. pretty much in the end, how much is the total amount. And so what we can do is we can end up using this formula here to help us figure our future value amount. In this formula, we call that A, where P is still the principal amount, the amount that you put in or borrow originally. The R is still your interest rate. The T is still time in years. And we can calculate how much we're going to have at the end, the future value, by using this formula. Okay, let me give you an example. Example number 3 says you have a loan for $1,060. It's been made at 6.5% for 3 months. Find the loan's future value, meaning at the end of those 3 months, how much are you going to actually owe total? Okay, so because it doesn't just ask us for the interest, it asks us for the total amount, we have to switch and use this new formula to help us find the future value. Let's go ahead and plug in all of our information. We know that the principal amount, the amount that we originally borrowed, was $1,060. We have a 1. We have an R for interest rate, but remember we're going to use a decimal version of 6.5%, so 0.065. And then we're going to put the time in years. Now be careful, don't put a 3 here, because if you put a 3, that would really mean that you kept this account for 3 years. But in this problem, it really says we're only keeping the account for 3 months. So really, I'm going to keep it in there for 3 out of 12 months, a fourth of a year. Okay? So now in my calculator, I'm just going to calculate all of these different pieces, being careful that you apply the correct order of operations. So inside the parentheses, I'm going to multiply first. I'm then going to add the 1. I'm then going to multiply it by the 1,060. I'm going to give you a second to do that in your calculator. I'm going to do 3 divided by 12 equals times 0.065 equals plus 1 equals times 1,060 equals. And let's make sure we all get the same correct answer. So at the end of the 3 months, how much total am I going to owe to the bank? You should end up getting $1,077, and if we're rounding to money, cents, it should be 23 cents. So I don't only owe $1,060 because I've accrued some interest. I should owe a little bit more, and so it makes sense for me to, in the end of 3 months, to owe $1,077.23. Make sure you get that number correct in your calculator and that you can round appropriately. Don't give me any more money than I deserve. All right, looking at example number 4, it says, suppose you spend $4 each day, 5 days a week on gourmet coffee, right? So all you Starbucks lovers, $4 even seems cheap, right? But let's pretend it's $4 every day, 5 days a week. Let's calculate at the end of the year how much money you actually spend on your flavored water. Okay? So I spend $4 a day, 5 days a week. I spend $20 a week in coffee. But I'm going to do that every week for a whole entire year. Do you remember how many weeks there are in a year? Yeah, 52. So if I do $20 a week for 52 weeks, can I multiply 20 times 52? At the end of the year, you spend over $1,000 on your coffee. $1,040 you spend if you buy coffee 5 days a week. Whew, that's a lot of money on just flavored water, right? All right, let's say instead of spending that $1,040 on coffee, you invested that money into a savings account where you're earning 5%. After the end of 1 year, if you give up your coffee for 1 year, how much money will you end up having at the end of that year? So I'm not just asking for an interest amount, I'm asking you for a future value. So we need to make sure that we use that future value formula from before so we can figure out at the end of the 1 year how much money do you end up having total. All right, so we're going to take our money. Instead of buying coffee, we're going to put it in the bank. We have a 5% interest, so 0.05 as a decimal, and we're going to leave that money in the bank for 1 year. Let's figure out how much money we'll have at the end of that year. In my calculator, I'm going to do 0.05 times 1 plus 1 times 1,040. You should end up in your bank at the end of the year having $1,092. So you actually made some money, right? How much money did you actually make in addition to the $1,040? Well, if you were to subtract those two numbers, you end up making an extra, what is that, $52? So an extra $52 you earned rewarding yourself by not buying your Starbucks coffee. That's pretty good, right? All right, let's do some more. Example number 5 says you borrow $2,500 from a friend and you promise to pay back $2,655 in 6 months. What simple interest does that really account to? Okay, so we end up having a future value and a principal amount. And so what we can end up doing is actually using that formula backwards to figure out what our simple interest is. Let me show you. Starting with that formula for our future value and simple interest, I can plug in the information that we do have. We know that the ending amount in this case is $2,655. We know that we borrowed originally $2,500. We're not really sure what the interest rate is. I'm going to continue calling that R. And I know that I'm going to borrow this amount for 6 months. But be careful. Remember, I'm not going to put in 6 because that would mean 6 years. I'm going to do 6 out of 12, or 1/2, half of a year, right? I'm going to go ahead and simplify this a little bit. And I'm going to write that 6 over 12 as a 1/2 next to my R. All right, and our goal is to try to solve for R. I want to figure out what R equals. What is my interest rate that I'm actually being charged by borrowing this money from my friend? A couple different ways you can do this problem. What you could do is, some students see that I can distribute this $2,500. We can do that if you'd like. We can leave this $2,655 on the left side. We can distribute the 25 to the 1. And we can distribute the 2,500 to the 1/2 R. So taking my 2,500 and multiplying it by 1/2, you should end up getting 1,250. Don't forget your R, that's there. So now let's just solve some simple algebra equation where we're trying to get R by itself. Let's go ahead and get rid of the 2,500 first. Since this is a positive 2,500, I'm going to move it over to the other side by subtracting. I end up getting 155 on this side. I end up having a 1,250 R on the other side. And I'm going to divide both sides by 1,250 so that I can get that away from the R. So I can figure out what R equals. Taking the 155 and dividing it by 1,250, I ended up getting R equals 0.124. Did you get that same number? Now remember that this represented an interest rate, and normally interest rates are given as percents, but this answer is actually in a decimal form. So what we still have to do is we have to take this decimal form and convert it into a percent. Remembering how to do that, where we move that decimal place over twice, the interest rate that my friend's actually charging me is 12.4%. That's kind of high. But I guess if you need the money, you might be willing to spend an extra 12.4%. Okay, so that's an example of working the formula backwards. If you know the ending amount, the beginning amount, and you need to find something else that's missing, like an interest rate. Okay? All right, let's look at the last example, number 6. It says here that you plan to save $2,000 for a trip to Europe in 2 years. You decide to purchase a certificate of deposit, a CD, from your bank that pays a simple interest rate of 4%. How much must you put in your CD now in order to make sure that you have the $2,000 in 2 years? So in 2 years, you're planning a trip. You need to have at least $2,000 in your bank. You need to know how much money you need to put in now so that at the end of those 2 years, you have enough money to go on your trip. So, don't we know a future value, what we want in the end? And we know that it's simple interest that our bank's going to give us. So we should be able to use that future value formula. And let's plug in some information. Let's see if we can use this formula to find our missing piece, how much money we want to put in the account now. So we know that my ending amount at the end of the 2 years, don't we want to make sure that we have at least $2,000 so we can go to Europe? How much money are we going to start with? Well, isn't that what we're kind of trying to figure out? We don't know what the principal amount is, so I'm going to call that P, because we want to figure out what that principal amount is, how much money we have to put in the account today. Do we know what the interest rate our bank's going to charge us? Yeah, it says here 4%, so let's go ahead and put that as a decimal, 0.04. And how long are we going to put this money in the account for? It says here for 2 years, so I'm going to use a 2 to represent 2 years. Okay, so now we need to solve for P. We need to figure out what P equals. If you notice, over here is just some number, right? And it's being multiplied by this P. It's right next to it. So in order to get P by itself, wouldn't we have to divide by that number to isolate that P? So that's what I'm actually going to do. I'm going to divide by whatever this funky number is over here to both sides. So that will allow me to get P by itself. So now, being careful in my calculator, I'm going to take 2,000 divided by, and then I'm going to do parentheses just like I have it on my screen. I'm going to do parentheses 1 plus 0.04 times 2, and then I'm going to end my parentheses. So in my calculator, again, I did 2,000 divided by parentheses 1 plus 0.04 times 2 parentheses. So that way my calculator knows that I want to divide the whole thing by that big expression. I'm going to push equal, and I ended up, hopefully you did too, getting P equals 1,851.851852, and then my calculator cuts off. Make sure you get that number. All right, so now that we have this number, we've got to actually finish the question and figure out how much money we need to put on our account today so that in 2 years we have enough money to go on our trip. And remember, we want to make sure that we have at least $2,000, not $1,999.99. We need to make sure that our amount ends up being at least $2,000. So if I were to round this, I would need to make sure that today, in order to have enough money in 2 years, then I need to put in my account $1,851.86, not 85 like we would typically round. Well, why is that? Well, because if I put only 85 cents in there and there's all this little extra, well, over the couple of years that I keep my money in the account, at the end, I'm not going to quite have $2,000. I might have a little bit less. So in order to ensure that I have at least $2,000, we're going to actually put in 1 more cent to make sure in the end I have at least $2,000. So the rounding on this question is a little bit different than a typical question. So you need to be careful on that one. When you are earning interest, they're not going to give you an extra penny. But if you need to make sure that you have enough money in the account now so that you have the total amount of $2,000 later, then you need to put in an extra penny. So the rounding is a little bit different on this question. So be careful on test day. Okay? All right, guys. I hope that helps with 8.2. Let me know if you have